Hey, welcome back. So at this point, what we need is a command line tool to help us to create plugins, create migration files, and models. Those are the three things we're going to be using the tool for. And that tool I'm talking about is this one here. We're going to call it Thunder because we're assuming our framework is called Thunder PHP. So this is going to be a command line tool. So we don't put a file extension on the command line tool. It's just Thunder as a file like that to make it easier to type. Because if we put .php, then we'll have to be typing that all the time, which may become too old very quickly. Now, before we do the command line thing, there is one suggestion by a viewer to add more functionality to the model class. And actually, let's add that to the database class. So here we have a private static query ID, but we can add further a affected rows number. So say affected rows, like so. Let's set it to 0 as a beginning value. And then we will duplicate this and we'll say insert ID, like that. Okay, so this will contain the ID. If we do an insert, this will contain the ID of the inserted row. So if, let's say, you're inserting one row, that's obvious. It's going to return the ID of the primary key. But if you insert 10 rows, for example, it will only bring back the very first ID that was inserted as a batch. That way you can use the row count to determine what was the last one if you actually need that. Excuse me, I think I'm developing something here. Okay, so affected rows insert ID. This will tell us the number of affected rows. Let's say you are doing a read select statement. This will show you how many rows were selected, or if you are doing an update, it will show you how many rows were updated, delete, how many rows were deleted. Okay, so how do we integrate this? So copy that affected rows and let's come down here to the query function. Where is this query function? Over here. So at this point, after we execute, we can check for those params. Now we will do this. Now we want to save this inside the instance as opposed to in the static version for self. Whatever instance this is going to be, let's say it's a model that we've instantiated, that's where that will be saved. So say this affected rows is equal to, and the affected number of rows will come from the statement. So we'll do st like that, and then it's called row count. So it's a function, so we're going to do that. So that function will calculate how many rows were affected or return that value. And then we will do the same thing with insert ID, like that. Okay, so with insert ID, it's last insert ID, like that. But this comes from the PDO itself, so we use con like that. So like this. Okay. Now you could use this here in order to determine whether you need to actually get any results, or you could use that to determine whether things worked out or not, but let's leave it as it is for now. Alright, so at this point there's a complaint that we haven't tested most of this code, and I agree, but if we get any errors, they're going to be very few. So let's do some testing at this point, because we want to see if this actually works, the affected rows, last insert ID, etc., etc. So what we're going to do is go to models. Now let's go to plugins. So basic auth plugin, remove any code that is here. Let's delete that. Okay, so in here what I want to do is instantiate our DB class. So I'm just going to say DB is equal to new core database, like so. Okay, so now that we have a DB class, we can do stuff with our DB class. So I'm going to say DB. Now I want us to create a database. So because we don't have the database yet, and if I go to my config.php, this is where my database name is. So there, I'm going to grab that. Let's come back to here, and I will paste that like so. Okay, so we run that query where we create a DB. It has to be like this: create database. Let's put the if statement, if not exists, like that. So create database, if not exists. There we go. Okay, good. So we can run several queries here. Let's create a table. So now this database does not exist in PHPMyAdmin. We can check that over here. We will see it here once we have it done on the list over here. So let me come back to this. So here we're going to create a simple table. So we'll say create table if not exists, users, and then in there I just need two columns. So the first one will be an ID, type int primary key, and let's put auto increment here, like that. Okay, so then let's put a comma, and then the next one is name. It's going to be varchar of 100, and allow it to be null. Okay, and we close that bracket. So that's how we create a table if it does not exist. So just by running these two, we will have a database and a table. Since we've just created the database, it's good to tell it to use the database. So we're gonna say use that, like that, so that it switches to that database and does this. Okay, great. So with that in mind, we just need to refresh our page, and let me refresh. So it says failed to connect to the database, unknown database plugin DB. Okay, so the reason this is happening is because in our database connection here, we're actually including the database name. So if you want to be able to create your database after making the connection, you have to remove this part. You can do without this part here, but it's pointless because on online servers you can't really create a database in this fashion by running a query. So I think it's pointless to have it there. So let's just remove this query here, these two actually. So what we're going to do is instead, let's go to PHPMyAdmin and create it from there. So I'm going to click create, and let's paste plugin PHPDB. So you can name your database anything. Let's click create there. But in terms of the table, we can just run our query. Okay, so call to undefined method last insert. I think I missed a T over there. So let's get back here. I missed a T, last insert. There we go. Okay, so let's refresh. So no errors. Let's check to see if we do indeed have created a table, and it seems we have. So there it is. We have a users table. If I click on it, this is what we have, just an ID and a name. Now we can start inserting stuff. So back to our plugin PHP here. Okay. So what I want to do before let's just insert stuff from here. So I'm going to click on insert. Excuse me. I'll write John, Mary, and click go, so that I have 2 records at least. So I'll check browse, and those are the 2 records I've added. Let me add duplicate records just so we can see what happens. Let's go Mary again and Peter this time. Let's save. So at least we have 2 records of Mary here. So what I want to do is do a select statement. So I'm going to do select all from users. And then once I do the select, I want to echo out the affected rows like that. So we run a query, then we check how many rows were affected. And here it shows you 4 rows were affected because we do indeed have 4 rows in the database. So it's working fine. Let's insert something. So let's say insert into users, and we just want to use the name column. Our values in this case are, let's say Tom. So not only do I want to check the affected rows, I want to check the, what did we call it? Insert ID. So back to here, insert ID. So if I now refresh, the ID is 5 of the insert. Wait a minute, it's 0 actually. Yeah, because I ran another query here after. Okay, so let me remove that. Let's try again. Okay, so there's 1 and there's 6. So here the first one is affected rows is 1. The insert ID was 6. So let's check to confirm that. And so there it is. So we've got 2 Toms there. So it's working fine. Let's try a delete. Let's try and delete 2 of these named Tom. So here we're going to say delete from users, and at this point we'll say where name is equal to Tom, like that. Okay, then affected rows, insert ID will obviously be empty, but let's see that. So it shows us affected rows were 2, there is no insert ID. So everything is working as intended, and that's great. So in here we have established that our database class is working as it should, and at least we know we can make a connection to the database and all that. That's great. But now let's deal with our command line 2, which is the topic of the video. So I'm going to come back here. Let's just do the basics. So I'm going to close my database thingy here, go back to plugin PHP, and let's remove everything we've done here and save. So that's in the plugins basic auth. There we go. So let's save that. Okay, so when it comes to the, let's see what I have here. All right. So when it comes to the command line 2 here, this Thunder PHP or Thunder file here will load files within the folder here, the Thunder folder. So for a second here, what I'll do is I'll create a new file because I want to get rid of these that I had copied. So I'll copy this and let's put it in here in the new file and save this file as init thunder.php. So this file will go into, let's say, app core. No, sorry about that. Thunder right here, init.php. So save. Let's put our PHP tags like that. Okay, so it will grab the config file from the main path here, and then it will grab these from over here in the core and in the models migration, and finally thunder.php, which we'll create in this folder right here. So let's make sure that exists as well. So right click, new file. Let's put PHP tags and save it as thunder.php. Save. Okay, so I can close all of this stuff. Now we're going to need this FC path to define it. So what's going to happen is we're going to load this page over here, right? And once we load here, this is where we will define the path. So let's do define like so, and we'll call it FC path. And all we're going to do is get the current directory. So we'll do that dot, and then we'll put the directory separator like that. Okay, so that's our path over here. So all I want to do here is going to echo your path is, and then we add FC path like so. Alright, so this is the Thunder file here in the main directory. So all we are doing is defining a path and then echo it out. Okay, so this can run in our browser. So I'm going to go back here and just type, let's see if we are allowed to run this. Yeah, I guess it still goes back to it still runs the index.php, which is fine. That way we don't accidentally run Thunder over here. So instead what we're going to do is, let's go to the command line. So what I'll do is I'll right click here to open this folder, and in this folder I'll copy my file path or folder path and then open my command line. And then here all I want to do is do change directory and then change to this particular directory. Now if when changing directory you are switching drives, you have to do the /d like so. Okay, so there we are. We have, let me clear the screen. So now that we are inside the project folder right there, we can actually run PHP files. If I just type the word PHP like this, actually that crashes the thing. I don't know why that happens on mine, or this is just a bug with PHP. So press Ctrl C to exit any command. So what I'm going to do is say php-v, capital V or small letter V, I think. Yeah, should have been small letter V. So say php-v. So this will tell you what version of PHP you're running and stuff like that. So if you see that, it means you're able to run PHP on your system. For as long as you installed it, you should be able to run it like this. Now if this doesn't show up, it means your PHP is not added to your system paths. So what you could do instead is you can either add it to the system environment variables, or you can access the PHP executable directly. So I know mine is inside C XAMPP, and then within the XAMPP there's a PHP folder, and then that's where there's php.exe. Then I can do -v. This should work just as well. So then it means every time you call PHP you have to type the full path, but that's not good. So instead you can edit system environment variables here if you are using Windows, and then go to environment variables, and then you can add the path of PHP to your system. So you look for path here, wait, system variables down here, and let's see, path over here. Let's edit this one. So here, if you look closely, you'll see there's this PHP folder right there. So you can add that PHP folder there as well, just by creating a new entry, and then you put your path over there. And then once you save, you don't need to do all of this anymore. Okay, enough of that. Let's try and run our file. So to run a file, we are in the directory where the file exists that we want. We say PHP, and then we put the file name. In this case, it's Thunder, and then we just press enter. So as you can see, it says your path is, and then it shows me the path. And that's because this is the code we added to this file here, called Thunder. Now, what we want, so this just shows that our file actually works. Now, what I want to echo instead is something called PHP SAPI, like that. I want to know what it contains. Now, this stands for Server API, so I want to know what value that will give me. So all I need to do is retry that same command, and then you see it says CLI. This stands for Command Line Interface. So it tells us that we are running PHP through the command line. Okay. So in that situation, the reason we need to know that is because I don't want anyone running this from your browser, because that could be a security risk. Somebody could start running migration files in your browser, and that won't be good. So we have to make sure that this is being run in the command line. So let's say if this is equal to CGI, as we saw there. Let's try if it's not, like this, or let's put this here instead. That didn't make sense. Okay, so if this is not equal to CGI like that, let's exit this and say these two can only be run in the command line, or something like that. So put whatever message you want to show there, and that'll be it. So once we try to run this somewhere else, it should not work. So let me try this if statement in our index.php file right at the top there, so that you see how it would work if we tried to run this in our browser. It will say these two can only be run in the command line. So we can't run from here, but it will accept if we go to the command line. So let's undo that. Come back to Thunder. Okay. So once we bypass this point here, we can change the directory to fcpath. Okay, there we go. Just so we make sure that we are running from this path. And then let's put display errors. Maybe let's put these in order like this. And then let's do ini set. Let's say display errors. Let's set that to 1. That way we make sure that we are allowed to see errors. And then we check if we are running this in the command line. Maybe this should be the first thing to check. It's up to you. You can choose whatever it is. Then define a path, change the directory to that path. And then we want to be able to grab command line arguments, because when we run things here, let me clear the screen, we'll be doing this PHP Thunder, and then we'll put some command line arguments like make plugin, like so. Okay, now we need to be able to grab what was typed over here. Yeah, So if I now press enter, I get an empty string. Do I? Okay, these two can only be run in the command line. We are in the command line. What's going on? Let me go back here. Okay, sometimes let me try to do this. Let me trim this. Sometimes it leaves empty spaces. Let's see if we'll get that error again. Let's see. What is going on? And I'm missing a D there. Okay, let's do something else. Let's just say yeah, okay, let's do that. So string pause, the needle is what we're looking for, CGI, okay. So because I'm unsure of what it's returning, it looks like CGI when we tested it, but there could be hidden characters. But I know that the very first item is CGI. So I'm just checking here to say if the result of this, at the beginning, it contains this, which is equal to 0. The string position of this one is 0, which means this is at the very beginning. Then let's exit. Let me try that again. So let's try to run this. What is going on? So in a case like this, let's try and just echo what the result of this is. So I'm just going to say echo that, like so. Okay, then let's go with it. Let me try again. What's happening? What is going on? Okay, let me do this and that. So instead of echo, let's use var dump instead, because it shows us exactly what's going on. Sorry about this. Sometimes these things malfunction and you're missing something. Okay, so it returns false, right? Which is 0. So this is actually true. Okay, I think in order to equate it to false or 0, let's use the double, this like so. Let's try that. All right. Okay, so now it has worked. Data types, yeah. Okay, so here we are asking, is this at the beginning of this the sentence that is returned, or the word that is returned by this? So if it's equal to 0 or false, then we do that. And this works just fine. Now, how do we get the arguments? So the arguments are contained in a variable, which I'm going to do, show here, print r. This variable is called argv, like that. So let's check what is inside argv by using print readable. So let me clear everything. Let's start again. So we'll say PHP Thunder and then press enter. So as you can see, there's just the word thunder in the arguments. But what if I type PHP Thunder and then say make plugin, and then maybe a plugin folder, something like basic auth, and enter. So this is what we get. We get an array that contains everything separated. Whenever we separate it with a space, we get a new entry here. So make plugin is one thing, and that. So we can use these variables now inside our system to do stuff, to run some PHP code instead. All right, so let's continue that in the next video.